Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and
Hello.
together we are ThinkerThemer, and today we're excited to be reviewing for you Planta Nubo, which was our #1 most anticipated game of Essen Spiel, and the reason why is because of the powerhouse group of designers behind it. There's Mike Keller from La Granja, Ode, who designed Cooper Island, and Uwe Rosenberg, who needs no introduction on our channel because we love his games. Lots of polyomino tile laying goodness, and you can see their design DNA come through in this game by the game builders.
So in Planta Nubo, we are going to be building gardens in the sky. So this game takes place 100 years in the future in a solar punk inspired world. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to generate the most oxygen possible. Whoever generates the most oxygen points by the end of the game will be the winner. The way we're going to do that is we're going to be building these flower gardens on top of trees. The trees are kind of helping us out after we had a bit of an apocalyptic ecological disaster, you know, go humans. And so these flower gardens, we're going to be able to take these flowers, ship them off in these like bee-like airships, and help us generate green energy. So this green energy will help us power up different modules, help us with these bots that help us create, again, like optimize things on our treetops. And then once we have these flower beds, we're going to be able to build or help them generate into forests. The forests are going to be one of the main things that are going to give us oxygen. Again, whoever has the most oxygen production or oxygen points by the end of the game will be the winner.
Now I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this game works before we talk about our thoughts, where we'll go into more details about the individual bits and pieces. But basically what you're trying to do in this game is every player has 2 player boards. This core player board has a polyomino tile puzzle in the center of it. But what's really interesting is what's happening around it. We are going to be drafting cards from the market that are going to build out a tableau that go around this board. But what's really interesting is you have a single die that's going to be moving around this energy track. Every time the energy track hits a piece of energy that's connected to a card visually, it's going to add a little token onto that card, and this is the way your tableau is going to be charged up, because you need to spend those tokens in order to activate the cards. Now, the cards are going to be one way to get actions done. And what are you trying to do in this game? Well, ultimately, you're trying to build these forests up into your puzzle area to generate oxygen, which are the victory points in this game. But what you're going to need to do first is you need to first clear these boulders off your puzzle, because they are blocking different areas of your board that you're able to build on. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to generate flowers. So in order to do that, you're going to be building out polyomino tiles. And when you lay a polyomino tile, you not only get the bonus that you've covered underneath it, but you also get to generate these flowers. So we take these cubes according to the color of the polyomino tile, and we place them on there. Now you've got these flowers that are sitting on your puzzle, and we need to get rid of them because we can't place a forest down on top of this puzzle until we've cleared those out of the way. We are going to be able to do that by shipping these flowers off to the airport or placing them onto different cargo areas that we've been able to put onto our own personal boards. The reason why you want to do this, not only to clear for forests, but also because you get energy. So when you do the deliveries, you get energy, which is going to drive that die forward and again power up your tableau. The other key component of the game is that on your turn, you're going to be placing one of your 4 tools into this grid-like area in order to select an action or a polyomino tile that you want to take. However, each of these different tools have different colors, and so there is a bit of blocking of your opponent, restricting where you can go in the puzzle. So for example, if I was to place this blue spanner down between these tiles, I get the option of which tile to activate. However, I can also spend robot points if I have them. I can spend 2 of them in order to be able to take both actions. If I'd placed it here, it would be to take 1 tile and also get to do the action on this tile. But what's interesting about this game is Maggie can now no longer go around this action tile with the same colored tool as one that's been previously placed, thereby restricting your movement a little bit. And why does it matter which tool you use? Well, at the end of your 3 turns each round, you're going to have 1 tool left over, and that tool is going to trigger a bonus action in this crafting area. So you want to be careful to think about which of these bonuses is best going to be advantageous to you at that point in the game, and then plan accordingly. Throughout the game, there's ways to collect oxygen in the form of income. However, a lot of the oxygen is going to be counted up at the end of the game as well through these end game scoring cards. Now, this is a system that is very much like Lost Ruins of Arnak, if you've played that game, where the rounds are being tracked by this telescope. And as we get further into the 4 rounds of the game, there's going to be more end game scoring cards available and fewer of the actions that are going to help you throughout the game available. And at the end of the 4 rounds, the person with the most oxygen will win.
That is right. Now, let me tell you a little bit about why I was so excited going into this game. And the basic thing about it, yes, the designers is one big draw card, but the other thing is the theme. This is one of my favorite settings, and I please want more and more designers to use this sort of setting, this sort of solar punk, or like helping regenerate, or helping with like a really positive thing in terms of, what we should be doing now in the world. In terms of how that kind of comes across, I actually really like all the colorfulness of it. It can be a little bit fiddly when you're, particularly if you have like, bigger hands at putting all the flowers onto the things. But as I was playing, I think it didn't feel as thematic as I was hoping. Part of that is because, as you can see, like we have different color tools, but those tools, aside from just the blocking, the sort of blocking the adjacency thing, they don't really do anything different. So it's like all the tools are just essentially different colors.
They could just be different colors.
And obviously that ends up just helping with the visual, like if you have any kind of visual impairment or anything like that. But that felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity. Then the other thing is the colors of the flowers. There's no real difference between them. They're just, aside from just some of them are a little bit more rare than others, but that's sort of about it, and the types of shapes. And then even the actions and the crafting, like none of it felt like, oh, of course, if I build this type of flower or I use this type of tool, then I'm going to be able to create this type. It's like all of the actions are very much just like, well, these are the actions that you can do, and all that sort of stuff.
It's very abstract.
And even with the cards, so the cards and the modules that you end up building around your board, again, they're very it sort of feels a bit arbitrary. Like I never kind of got a sense of going, oh, I'm really going to build this type of world, and therefore I'm going to go for this type of cards. It's like, oh, I'm actually going to go with, more of the purple forest. And again, even the forest tiles are just like, there's no difference between them aside from they all have kind of slightly different shapes, and even the benefits that you get, because that's the other thing, we have like our own kind of little private forest, and then the kind of the public ones that you're racing to get. Because there's fewer of them. They all kind of activate. Oh, I've destroyed everything. They all kind of activate in a very similar way here, and so it didn't really feel like, ooh, like it still felt like a more of a mechanical
Yes,
puzzle.
what you're saying is the outcome doesn't feel like differentiated from other opponents.
No.
There are a lot of space games that we don't really like, but at least like the cards are usually quite thematic, and you feel like you've taken your world in a particular direction.
Yeah.
And you definitely don't get a sense of this here, because it's all really about having the right combination of icons. So you're basically trying to move up the robot track, you're trying to add forest, flip forest, add tiles, deliver, but it all feels very mechanical.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about one of the mechanics that I actually really love about this game, and I think it's super clever, and it is that energy track that I started with when I was talking through how the game works, because as you build out this tableau, something that's really interesting in this game is every time you get a new card that's going to give you some kind of power throughout the game, you add it to this tableau which is around your player board, and to just show that it's connected to your energy track with this cable here, you add an energy token. And this energy token, as you move past it, that's going to be the thing that allows you to add a token. So you start with 1 when you collect it, and then every time you go past it, you're going to add another token, which is making the card more powerful as the game goes on. Also, if it's this type of token, it's going to give you an extra action, so you want to keep charging it up. But what's interesting is when you add cards, it's adding these tokens, and the die moving around has to touch every one of these green energy icons, which means that the more cards you add, the longer it takes for your die to go around your tableau, and therefore if you've got a card on one side that you need to charge up, it's going to take it longer to get around. So That is a really interesting dynamic, and I just think it's really clever because often you'll have these really powerful cards in your tableau and you'll be like, oh, I just need to charge it, otherwise I can't use it.
Yeah.
So that is probably my favorite mechanic.
It also adds an interesting element in that, you have those end game point cards. And so if you start trying to collect those too early, you're going to be, well, not only are you going to not have more during game actions, but you're going to be making it slower for you to reach those tiles that do allow you to give actions or even allow you to power them. So it's an interesting balance to have with that.
And the oxygen track, which is your victory points, the main goal of the game, and the energy track have a really nice synergy because as you're delivering flowers, you're going to be generating energy, which is going to charge up your tableau, but you also need to deliver the flowers so you can put the forest down, and that's going to give you oxygen and income throughout the game. But if there's one thing we want to communicate about this game, it is that it is extremely challenging.
Yeah.
This is definitely not a beginner game.
This is definitely an advanced level, expert level game. This is not a gateway. This is not a let's level up someone that's a little bit into board games at the moment.
No.
This is you're well into gaming. You're well into your complex strategy games, and now we're playing this.
Yeah, and there's two real reasons that make this game really complex. The first is that actually you only have very few turns in this whole game, and so you have you're going to be placing 3 tools out across 4 rounds, which means you've got 12 placements of these tools. And because you can activate double action tiles once per round, it means that you've got a maximum 16 activations of these tiles throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
And there's lots you want to get done here.
Yeah.
You're trying to build out your puzzle, you're trying to build out your engine, and so it feels like you're constantly restricted. It doesn't feel so tight that you're locked out of what you want to do.
Yeah,
I do want to make that distinction.
You
though.
always you're never going to be sitting with a tile going, well, now I can't do anything with it. Because even though it's got that, the adjacency restriction, obviously it scales the more players you have, the more tiles you have. And I never found myself locked out altogether. There's still always plenty of places to go.
Yeah, you might have to reconsider
pivot.
where you're going to go and pivot. There's
Plan
also, when you're delivering flowers up here to these airships, you do have the opportunity to swap out one of them with this warehouse, and that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well. So it feels like there's always somewhere else that you can go, but the number of turns puts a lot of pressure on players to be very, very optimal. And this leads into the second point about why this game is so hard. It's because your turn is so long. There is so much that you get to do in your turn. So the way that this works is explained on a very handy player guide, and there are 2 of these in the box, so you can put 1 at each end of the table. This is, in my mind, absolutely essential because I could not keep in my head where I was at on my turn. So what happens on your turn is you choose one of these tools, you get to place it. Then, if you can spend 2 robots, you're going to be able to activate both tiles. Otherwise, you just activate 1.
And that's only once per round. So you
Yes,
can only do
once
that
per
robot
round.
overwork. Yeah.
And then you play out the action. So maybe I remove a boulder, then I activate something in my tableau, which triggers more action. So I've got to play that out. Then I get to, if I've paid 2 robots, I also get to play a polyomino tile, put flowers on it. And then I go into the next stage, which allows me to do a personal delivery to each of my cargo areas if I've put them on my board. So you'll be drafting those to add to your player board.
Which would be its own action. So again, it's like, so I would have to have done that action, like spend a tool, previously to have done that. Yeah.
Yep. So then you get to deliver those. That generates energy. So then you're going to be moving your energy track, and then you're going to be adding tokens everywhere that you've gone past. Or sometimes you might have flipped some of these energy tokens to their victory point side, so you're going to be adding victory points. If you're getting the idea, there's a lot of admin that you're doing to play out your turn. And then the very last thing on your turn, every turn, you get to activate one of this type of card, which is to spend one of these tokens to do the action that's on there. So a supplementary bonus action that could then trigger other effects that makes your turn exceptionally long.
And adding to that, there's a couple of built-in modules like on top of your board where they're really, really powerful. So these are the ones that allow you to gain more cards. So it's very tempting to use them. However, they have this balance of every token that hasn't been used that's left there. It's going to be 3 points by the end, which is no small feat. Like that's quite. So again, that adds to the tension of like, oh, which of my modules will I pick?
Yeah, and so because the turns are so long, this gets worse the higher the player count. So we'll come back to talk about player count, but suffice to say that this game is difficult because if you're in a 4-player game, what happens is the game state is changing just enough. So perhaps people are making deliveries where you were going to make a delivery and now that's no longer available. Or perhaps someone takes the spot that you wanted, which now means you can't really optimally place the tool you wanted to place. So you are constantly thinking through, okay, so if I go there instead, can I still flow through the rest of the things I wanted to do in the way I wanted to do them? And that leads to a lot of AP. And so this game, the feeling you get when you play this game is everybody is very quiet. It's a very quiet game, and the best way to explain it, it's a very heady
My
game.
head hurts sort of vibe.
Yes. And in a 4-player game, honestly, I was so quiet and so focused on what I was doing because I was so worried that if I engaged in conversation, I would forget the steps and then hold everybody up when it got back to my turn. And so it's just a very interesting dynamic that I haven't experienced for a while in a game. Just the sheer cognitive load is quite high because of the sequence of steps, which means also, by extension, you can't really plan too far ahead. You can maybe think about the things you want to get done this round, but the exact execution of that is very hard to plan out.
You are always holding at least a sequence of 3 or 4 things for your upcoming turn, which again, if one of those gets dropped, now I have to come up with a new or have had a backup sequence of 4 on my mind. Now let's also talk about this, the polyomino puzzle that you're creating here. I think it is really interesting to have this tension of needing to remove these bulges in order to access that lighter brown area. But then as and I actually really enjoy that layering of the, having to have that layer, the flower garden, before you're able to put your forest on top. And not only that, you can't just get rid of flowers. Like they have to be either shipped or there's some actions that allow you to compost them, which I actually did enjoy that bit of like going, they sort of get put in the compost queue and then they get turned into soil, which we haven't really talked about, which is another really good way of filling in like little, alone gaps.
Yeah, and that is one of the few thematic elements. I really liked that too. So if you remove these, the fun thing is that with these soil tokens, when you go to place to forest, you're allowed to put that down there to create a soil bed for which your forest can go on top.
Reline the forest.
Yeah, and I really liked this idea about removing the boulders because each of the boards are slightly asymmetric in that they've got different placement of different bonuses, so you can decide which boulder you want to remove to help you build out this forest. However, what I found over the course of multiple games is that this puzzle is not super interesting or different across games. Ultimately, you really are just trying to create that bed. It doesn't really matter about the adjacencies of flower colors or anything like that in order to create this basically oxygen generating forest here. And also there's this pipe element. So when the die goes past these pipes, if the pipes are connected to a puzzle piece that is, imagine, sticking into here, if there's no flower on this space, you get to add a flower. If you go past and there is a flower, you can remove it and get a victory point. It really feels like just a consolation prize for having built in this zone, which isn't going to, be able to have a forest on top of it. But it's not super interesting. And actually, it just adds a bit of complexity that I felt like didn't need to be there.
Yeah. One other thing that we haven't really talked about, just because that reminded me of that, you have this sort of kind of goal track as well as part of your board. And that kind of can give you a little bit of direction in terms of, like, for example, this will increase my income if I'm able to reach a point where I have 7 flowers available. And so if I have 7 flowers, again, but that moving up that track is going to be its own action. So I'd have to spend an action. Once I've met the condition to go up, yes, I get a bonus and I get an ongoing ability. But this can actually be, that's probably where the majority of the variability over different games is going to come. And some of those are considerably harder than others. So for example, there's one that is about filling in those pipes. And one of them is like, I think it's like hitting 4 of those pipes, which could really kind of disadvantage you during the game, depending on your strategy. Or sometimes you can have incredible synergy. Sometimes it can be completely kind of opposite ways. So that can be quite,
because at the start of the game, you will get those given to you at random. And so sometimes they do work nicer together than like the steps work nicer together. But also you get 2 starting cards that go into your tableau. And in the basic game, those are also randomly given. I like the advanced variant where you actually get to choose, because what can happen if you don't choose is a really good synergy between your cards and the stages of the arbory track, which is going to give you income. And so that can set someone up for better success more than other players at the very beginning of the game. And that very much links to the fact that this game, it feels like you are ultimately trying to do the same thing over and over again. So yes, you might take slightly different tacks to that, but if you're playing against Euro players, and we have, who are very good at these types of games, you're all basically going to get the deeds ticked off. You're going to be able to build up this puzzle, you clear out your boulders, you build the forest. And what makes the difference then in who wins the game, we've found, are slight nuances in the starting cards and that arbory track, which makes it faster and easier to do it, and the end scoring cards. And so because it comes down to the cards for us, one thing that we notice is that it really depends on what is drawn out of that card deck that happens to align with your turn.
Yeah, the timing, which you have no real control of, in the sense that this is not the type of game where you can take an action to gain the first player marker. Like, this is one where like the first player is just naturally going to move around the table. So it has come down to this, where in some games at the very end, like a card comes out that you're like, oh, we both, like one of us could get, at that point, one of us, if whoever gets it first is going to get 8 points from that card. And so it's just a matter of like, oh, so as luck would have it, you're going to be first to be able to get it. So that's a bit tricky. There's also no way to clear the market. So even if there was nothing good for you and your puzzle, you can't clear it to hope that you get a better card. So it really is a little bit of randomness in the timing of that, which is unfortunate. But let's talk about player count. So because of all the complexities of the game, because of the complexities of your turn, the game is much snappier at a 2-player count. And actually, I enjoyed playing it just with Maggie. It scales well. This puzzle, the action tile layout is different depending on the player count, which helps scale it so that it still has that, oh, we might bump into each other kind of vibe, but in reality that doesn't happen very often. But because of that, I actually liked this puzzle more at a higher player count, because it gives you more combos to choose from. Because there's more tiles, you can be like, oh, I could do this and that, or this and that. And so I felt like that gave me more to choose from. Even the flower beds, like you get then another set of color flower beds, whereas here sometimes if I were to go here, now Amy's completely blocked from getting reds for the rest of this round. Which has happened. That's why I can give that example confidently. Yes.
Yeah, so I prefer the bigger puzzle at higher player count.
But you have the downtime.
But the downtime is a lot. And in a 4-player game, if you have anyone in your group that is going to only, start thinking about their turn on their turn and then has to think through every iteration of what could be possible for them to do, this game is going to take forever. So even with snappy Euro players at a 4-player count, the game was taking around 2 hours. Maggie and I managed to get the game in under an hour. So in about 45-50 minutes, Maggie and I can play a game of this, as long as Maggie is keeping on top of me with my decision-making time.
I'll also talk about it solo. So it does have a solo mode, which essentially is, and I think this is quite clever. So the other side of your of the board has the different bots. So, and they're all different in terms of the difficulty. So with the bots, you're essentially going to be facilitating a bot turn. So it's an artificial opponent, where this is going to be kind of recreating, like the boulders are actually going to block these areas. They have their own sort of bot actions, but then they also have a logic that you need to be able to meet in order for them to do that particular action. If not, you kind of keep going down, down in the sequence. So every turn that the bot takes, you have all these sort of bot cards. You're going to be revealing a bot card, and then it's going to have a logic of which tool is going to have the preference for using, which action, which this took me far too long to figure out. These icons are the icons that are on the image that's on the edge of the tiles. Once that finally clicked, I was like, oh, this is a lot easier now. So then it's going to give you a preference of which action. But once I go to that action, then I have to go to my logic of, okay, it's going to do that action if this or that. And then it'll say, well, where for that tile, for example, where it's going to place the that tool. So again, it's going to create that adjacency blocking, and then it usually has another action, which often will be around either giving it more flowers or clearing up the market or refreshing the market and things like that. So I think for me, the bots also increase in difficulty, so you can actually give yourself more or less of a challenge. For me, as we said before, there's already so much cognitive load of things that you're having to hold in your mind, of the sequences and things that you're having to do, that to then add on top of that going, okay, well, now I'm pausing my part of the game to facilitate a bot, and then they were going to do this if these conditions are met. By the time I come back to my own, I'm like, there's no hope of me. It's not the kind of automa or the kind of bot that I would, the kind of solo that I like to play, because I lose track. But having said that, if for a lot of people that prefer to have an opponent that is sort of replicating a real life opponent, then that can work really well. There's a little bit of admin. It's workable. But yeah, it means that then you have someone to compete against in terms of the points, and you have that stress of like, oh, they're coming, they're up my heels, or they're leaving me behind. So yeah, but it's not a solo that I would play just because of my player preferences.
Sure. And so let's get into our ratings for this game. So my rating for this game is a 7.8, and I want to talk about why that is. Obviously, lots of anticipation going into this game. It's a game that I probably don't necessarily feel like I need to keep in my collection. To give you a bit of context, Hallertau, which is a similar game that is quite hard, but like we played it a lot and kind of the puzzle wore itself out. I gave that a 7.7, so it's slightly higher than that. I enjoyed the mechanics of this one more. And then if we compare it to other things, Tapestry and Terraforming Mars are around the same level for me. Everybody gasps at home. And if we compare it to other higher ranked games, Newsford for me is an 8.2. So that just gives you some relativity. Yeah. I enjoyed the puzzle here, but it's so heady that it's going to restrict the number of the type of players that I can get it to the table with. Yeah. And I feel like if I don't play it for a while, I'm going to very quickly forget how it all kind of comes together. And also just the lack of variability in the puzzle. It feels like when you start a new game, you're kind of just starting on the same path. Yeah.
So for me, it's going to be a 7.6. And I think, and again, I can kind of appreciate all the different elements that mechanically have gone into it to create a really an interesting puzzle to experience. However, I think I start losing interest because there's nothing thematic. Like thematically, I don't really get that sense of I'm building this thing, or I'm in this world and I'm getting to use this tool to create that thing. So that means that I kind of lose engagement throughout. So yeah.
So that's our review of Planta Nubo. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like. It helps the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content, more games from Essen Spiel very soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.